Welcome back to the webinar series. Today's is the last actual webinar in the upgrade series. So we're going to talk today about things to consider after you upgrade SQL Server. And again, like I've said a couple times in the blog post, and like I mentioned ahead of time, this webinar really has little to do with the SQL Server upgrade, but it's my chance to extol some of my virtues on you when it comes to best practices and configuration and desired state and all the stuff that we should be worrying about, but sometimes don't have time to do. So, like we talked about before, when you're done with a SQL Server upgrade or when you're doing a SQL Server upgrade, this may be something that a company might do once every 5 years or once every 10 years, as some people here would say. And if we're doing it so infrequently, what better thing to do than to use this as an opportunity to start fresh? Pretend it's like New Year's Day for your SQL Server, and you're going to finally eat better and work out or whatever your resolution is. Except for this is going to be much more serious than a New Year's resolution because you're actually going to do it. So when you're done, how do we know we have a best practice set up on our SQL Server? How do we know our SQL servers are set up for success? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, kind of if you're new to the series, this is where we have been. We've done a lot of things. We had a sort of a big picture at the very beginning. That was more just talking about why. So why are we going to upgrade? What's the point? Then we talked about what do you do before you upgrade? How do you plan it? How do you ask the right questions, get the right people involved? We talked about checklists, and that's one download I'm still working on finalizing for you. So that'll be in the recap. We do have one PDF I'll talk about in a second to download today from last week, the SQL Server Health and Best Practice Checklist. We finally released that. So you can download that on a blog post that went out today. And then today, we talked last week about the upgrade. So how do you actually upgrade? How do you actually go in there and sort of do your upgrade? We talked about, again, in 30 minutes, I'm not going to tell you how to upgrade your SQL Server from start to finish, but we talked about the important concepts. I think the HADR web series might be a little more involved. We can stretch it out a bit, maybe do a few more weeks in there and actually do some demos and AGs and FCIs and even log shipping. But this, I don't want to get into demos because there are so many. Yep, I'll post a link. Actually, I'll post it right now. If you just go to my blog, go to my blog, Jose, and you'll see the latest post is the recap from week 3. And in there's 2 links. There's only 2 downloads right now. There's the 20-ish page SQL Server configuration guide, and then there's sort of the much smaller PDF of the do your own health check guide. That's cool, but the actual SQL Server configuration checklist is just it's sort of a recap of all of our best practices that we look through when we do a SQL Server upgrade. It's checklist is probably a strong word for it. It's really a document with bullet points, but I'm sure we could probably turn it into a checklist if people would like it that way. And then the last thing I'm working on is an actual upgrade checklist. Again, I might just make an Excel spreadsheet and post that instead of trying to make it PDF and make it marketing friendly. That's the hang up here, is trying to get into PDF, but I'll figure out the right format, and I'll put that when I share this video from this series next week. I'll share that, and next week I'm not traveling as much, so I should actually have time to get the blog post out by probably Monday or Tuesday, like I hope, and get the transcript service to run sooner. Anyway, that'll be the last downloadable thing we have. There is the upgrade checklist, or the before and after and steps there. So anyway, we're here today. We're going to talk about after. So we're going to talk about what do we consider when we're all done upgrading. You're not just done when your upgrade's done. And if you think you're done when your upgrade's done, you're lying to yourself. You should never be done with SQL Server. We'll talk about that in a second. And then next week, we're going to do a live hangout. So this will not be on Webinar Ninja. You have to go to that link right there, that youtube.com/watch, and that will take you to, I think, to my channel, the Straight Path, our channel, I should say, the Straight Path channel. And once you're there, you can there's a little remind me or whatever icon. You can click that icon, and Google will somehow let you know, maybe give you an iCal to remind you for the live hangout. So next week, same time, we'll have the whole Straight Path technical team, or a good portion of us anyway. I know Tara will be there. I know I'll be there. I think Mike Clark will be there. I'm not sure. And maybe Jack and Joe, maybe Bruce. So we'll have the whole technical team there to answer your questions. So if you have questions, we've gotten a couple. If you have more questions, whatever they are, if it's about a SQL upgrade or even about the health checks and the best practice stuff, bring the question with you live or if you're too shy or you can't be live, we'll record it. Just send me an email to mike@straightpathsql.com, and we will answer that question on that hangout. We'll record it, and when this whole series is all done next week, when I do that hangout, I'll take the video from that and all these other videos and blog posts, and we'll just make one sort of big, sort of like a spoke or hub blog post that just lists all the videos in order with more download links. And as I rewatch the videos and listen to my annoying voice, I say, oh, I should probably add that. I'll add that. So I'll add a lot more extra links that nobody asked about, but that come to mind while I watch it. So that last post will hopefully kind of be a guide and maybe even have some checklist steps in there. The goal, again, is not to upgrade your SQL servers in 5 30-minute webinars. It's really to get you thinking about the right things and to help get you your questions answered and to put you on the right track. So thank you for coming back, by the way. A lot of you came back, and I appreciate that. So you stuck with us. So either you have nothing else to do, or or you appreciate the content. So who am I? You all know by now. Most of you know who I am. I'm Mike Walsh. I run Straight Path Solutions. We're a SQL Server consultancy. I'm not doing this as a SQL Server consultancy thing. I'm doing this as really as an MVP thing. I'm just doing this as a person in the community trying to give back. Whether I keep my MVP or don't, I don't care. I just like sharing. And our company does a whole bunch of things. But one of the things we do a lot of, being a consulting company, is come alongside people and do upgrades. So as a result, I've been burned by a lot of upgrades, and I've taken over upgrades that they didn't think about these things ahead of time. They didn't go through a checklist. They didn't do best practices. So we've sort of seen, we've been there to catch people when they fall from upgrades not well thought out. And I want to avoid that for you. I want you to avoid that. So where are we? Well, again, there's some recaps. If you go to straightpathsql.com/blog, you'll see pretty much all the latest posts. There's one availability group post in there, but the other latest posts are all about upgrades. And I have a couple more posts in the queue, in the draft mode, that will be about upgrades as well. And again, we'll have the big recap post next week with a bunch more links. So really the content for the rest of the next week or two on my blog will be about upgrades. And I'm going to switch over and make it HADR stuff, because that will be the next webinar in March. Sort of, again, the same idea. We're not going to go in depth. We're not going to be 500 level material. I want to start at the beginning. What should you think about before? Which approach? How do you do RPO and RTOs? And how do you balance budget? And can AGs do this? Can FCI do this? How do we mix and match? And how can we do it on a shoestring? And what shouldn't we do on a shoestring? And all these things I want to talk about before, during, and after. In fact, every single webinar we do, I really want to kind of hammer this whole idea of things to think about and do before, things to think about and do during, things to think about and do after. And I think if we just simplify it to that, we can make it simple, right? That's my hope. So the next series will be probably 2 weeks after the live hangout. So towards the end of March, and that will be again, on high availability DR. So the content will start switching over to HADR at that point, I think. But by now we should know all the things we knew last week and the week before. So we should know why we want to upgrade. We should know what we need to think about, what questions we should be asking, who, what, when, where, and why from 2 weeks ago's video. We should really be knowing where we want to go, how we want to get there, and really why we want to go. And now we should also know how, because last week we talked about how. If you all remember one thing from last week, I don't like in-place upgrades, and really, frankly, you shouldn't either. It doesn't save you time, and the rollback can be bad. If you have no choice, you have to be careful and plan it out and spend extra time making that rollback checklist in the go, no-go criteria. But you should have a better idea of how you want to upgrade, how you'll test it, who's in charge. That sounds so simple, but so many times you can have conversations and somebody thinks that they just got assigned a task, or they think they assigned you a task, but nobody knows, because nobody's just done that little, here's the plan, here's your role, here's your role, here's your role. And, to people who asked before, I forget who it was now, maybe Dale, what if, like 4 weeks ago, what if you have all the hats, you're the DBA, the sysadmin, the network admin? Well, have the conversation with yourself, again, to understand what the right roles are and the right pieces are. And then we'll talk about the rollback, talk about the steps, and that's kind of what we should know from the before and during upgrades. So that's it. We're upgraded. Congratulations. The webinar series is over, right? No. Remember we talked last week about this. You all remember what this is, right? You don't have to all type in chat, but it takes hard work to type a few keys. But we know what this is. This is the showtime rotisserie grill. And actually, I think my in-laws have one, and it actually works okay. And you can cook Italian sausages in it, by the way. But I'm not Rome Popeil. um, and it's really good if you don't like greasy Italian sausage in your spaghetti. But anyway, I really digress now. um, this is a chicken making machine. It's set it and forget it is what he had all the people in the infomercial audience saying over and over. Set it and forget it. This is not the SQL Server rotisserie chicken machine. And this slide right here, while I've changed the SQL Server logo, the very first talk I ever gave on SQL Server, one of my slides was the rotisserie chicken machine with a SQL Server 2008 logo on it. Probably 11 years ago, I had this presentation I gave called "So You Want to Be a DBA? Where do you start?" And so many people, not you, because you're here at the webinar and you care about the SQL community, you care about learning, but so many people think that SQL Server can be set and forgotten, right? You install it really easy. It's there's a few more clicks to have to do, but for the most part, it's next, 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 finish, and then you can go away, have some of your no brand name, have some of your coffee, no sugar. It's Americano, but you can just walk away and come back and poof, you have a SQL Server. And then you can take your installer from your client for your ERP system or, whatever application you're using to do critical business. And you can install that application and it will create its own database for the most part, or maybe you have to create it. And then you can walk away and you have a SQL Server. And I can't tell you how many health checks I do for clients, big and small clients, where it's like, oh, you don't take backups. Do you know you don't take backups? You don't do check DBs. You don't do this. You don't. I see it all the time. Not you. None of you do that. You're watching this video. You're here at this webinar. You're not doing that because you care about best practices. But other people do. So SQL Server, I'm not a slide guy, so you can make fun of my animations all you want. But there you go. That's the extent of my animations. So rotisserie chicken, SQL Server, no. A bouncing no too, and a misshape. But SQL Server is not set it and forget it. That's the main point of this one webinar. We're going to talk about just, again, things to keep in mind. And this almost goes back to one of the before webinars where I told you that you have to do a health check first. So if you were obedient and you did your health check before, you're going to be okay because you saw what was bad and you care and you made a list, a checklist even, of what you want to do new and better on the new server and you fixed it, right? Didn't you? I hope you did. I hope you're going to. But if you didn't do the health check and you've upgraded and you kind of did a set it and forget it upgrade where you just do your upgrade and you're done, well, it's not too late. You can do a health check. In fact, I recommend you take one of the free health check tools out there from all the people in the SQL community who've worked hard to build them and do a SQL Server health check once a year. There's DBA checks is the PowerShell I don't mention here. And in fact, I'm going to make a note here. Normally our office manager comes to the meetings to take notes, but she's actually on a client call. Some of us have to do work. So I just want to make a note here on my notebook. Give me a second. I'll make sure I include some links to other tools. I mentioned Glenn's script. I mentioned Brent's Blitz scripts, but there's so many other ones. And I'll mention a few others. And try a different flavor. But once a quarter, once a half year, once a year, do yourself a favor and give yourself a SQL Server health check. Why, Mike? The configs don't change. I know they don't change, but new databases got created, new users got created, new logins got created. All things have changed. Maybe not your max stop and your max memory. Hopefully that's not changing as you go, but it could. You could have other people who are helpful DBAs in there or vendors with the wrong level of access because you didn't fix security, undoing your best practices. So after you upgrade, and if you never upgrade, and if you go to the cloud, you never have to worry about upgrades. Do health checks. Make sure your server's good. Seriously, it saves a lot. So Dale's saying, great point, Dale. He says, applications change and new stored procedures get installed. They may not be performing as expected. And there are some clients tools out there that will actually change your system configuration because the vendor thinks they know best and they need SA for the installer, and the installer will actually change some settings. It'll turn XP command shell on. And then when you get audited in 9 months, the auditor says, why is XP command shell on? And you say, it's not. I turned it off. No, it's on. And you say, I don't know who did it. And you turn it off. And then, you get a phone call from accounting saying that the system's not working. So you cannot just install and walk away. The DBA, whether that's your official title or not, is the person at the company. Again, I'm being, this is hyperbole, sort of, but you as a DBA, I think it stands for database advocate. You are the one who cares about the data. In fact, I'll say, and you can write me a letter if you like, you're the only one who cares about the data in the company. And that may not be true, but you should act like it's true. Act like you're the only one who cares about the data, and treat it well. And that means do health check. That means when that bad application vendor tries to do something naughty, you get mad at them and you say something about it. So, you know, some best practices evolve, right? So if you were to get a SQL Server health check from me, 10 years ago, before, I think it was before Glenn started writing his diagnostic scripts, maybe about the same time. But anyway, 10 years ago, before I had a Blitz or Glenn scripts, and I kind of have my own. I bet you there are things I would tell you about today that I didn't check 10 years ago. There are things that I forget about today that, or that I find today that I didn't even think of 3 years ago. So some best practices evolve. And it's okay to learn, but the trick is you have to keep learning, right? So towards the bottom in italics there, I say always learn. Part of what you do after your upgrade is don't just move on to other things and forget about your basic DBA skills. Go to classes, take webinars, come to the free HADR webinar. Maybe we'll do one on SQL Server best practices and performance tuning and configuration. And, learn about sargable queries. I know we should all know this, but I keep finding the same problems over and over. So somewhere, someplace, people aren't learning. And so if we learn and we do more, we're good. So I'm reading from the bottom up, but do the health check. Again, our PDF is a real basic step. So over the 2 downloads we have, the PDF, one of them is just a real small, don't forget about these important things, and people get burned by these things. Those are the things we see most often getting burned by. The longer document, the one that came in today that we just kind of hot off the presses today, that has a lot more details about how we configure SQL. But the trick is be intentional. Intentionality is important, right? So just here's a list of things, right? What's your max memory set? Did you set it? Again, it's never set. Do you have power saving enabled? That's always set these days still. Is your tempdb configured best practices? The nice thing about 2016 and 2017, by the way, is the installer tries to manhandle you and force you to do tempdb the right way. It even forces you to turn on, if you click the little box and understand what the box says, perform volume maintenance, which gives you instant file initialization. And I have to say that slowly. But it turns that on for you. Configure your max stop, configure max memory, do maintenance. Don't just install SQL Server and run away from it. Do your maintenance on it. Do your indexes. Now there's lots of schools of thought about when you should rebuild and reorganize your indexes and should you do it, and forget about that. That there's a debate, and I actually think both sides of the debate have merit. There's no debate about should you update statistics. Yes, you should. And if you're not doing it, you're in trouble. And are you doing a backup plan? Are you taking a nightly full, daily diffs, transactions every 15 minutes or hour? And if you are, is it corruption resistant? And by that is, actually, I'll take a side step to talk about corruption resistant backup strategies here. I have a blog post that's really, really long about it, and maybe I'll put it into one of my links, but I can shorten the 4,000 word blog post, I think. If you take a weekly check DB, like most people do, or a lot of people do, because you don't have the performance start, or you don't have the performance hit available to do more frequently, and you don't have the ability to do it in an offline server and all that. If you do a check DB weekly, and if you do a check DB weekly, and so let's say we do on Sunday morning, did my check DB, and it's great. So cool. We have no corruption last week. And now we do our check DB next Sunday, and there's corruption. When did that corruption happen? Anybody know? Do you know when the corruption happened? You might know if a user got an error message that told them that, hey, you're trying to talk to a corrupt page. What if you have a big database and nobody talks to that corrupt page except for CheckDB when it runs? So some database page got corrupted, and based on the error log and how you look at it, you may or you may not. In fact, I would say based on the experience of people who call us up in a panic, you likely won't know when that corruption happened. So now you have a corruption that you don't know when it started. What are you going to do? What are your choices, right? You can run a CheckDB repair allow data loss, and that allow data loss is serious. You don't really get to control what data is lost, and you can kind of see what data is lost potentially, but you might not know what data was lost. So now you can tell the business, hey, the good news is We don't have corruption anymore. The bad news is we're missing some data. I don't know what data we're missing, but it's probably one of these tables, I think. That's not a really confident thing to have to be able to say. Um, or you can restore the Monday backup and say, are you corrupt? Restore the Tuesday backup, are you corrupt? Restore the Wednesday, are you corrupt? Thursday, oh, yep, we were corrupt on Thursday. So we're going back to Thursday when we had no corruption, and anything that happened after 2 p.m. Thursday, we've lost the data. Sorry. Only 3 days a day, no big deal, right? Or you could have a corruption resistant backup strategy. And all that is keep all your logs for the week. Keep every single transaction log backup for the week. And you have to be doing your backup, your restore tests and verify your backups and actually do restore tests periodically to make sure you don't have some long-standing IO problem causing your backups to die. But if you do this, if you do a regular basis, keep your transaction logs until you have a good check DB. So keep your fulls and diffs, and really all this, the most important is you keep the full right after your last good check DB log, right up until the point you know this week's check DB is good. And I'm paranoid, so add a day or two. Storage is cheap, much cheaper than data loss. And if you have corruption that you detect on Sunday, you have two choices now. You can try and figure out when it happened and try and restore around it and see if it's just the missing, is it an index problem and we can just rebuild the index and say, whew, dodged a bullet. Or you can restore the last good full. So that's way back to Sunday, and then restore every single transaction log back up since Sunday to this Sunday, and poof, your corruption is gone. Because remember, the corruption exists in the data file, the MDF or the NDFs. So your data file is corrupt. The log file is it's like a replay log of redo this transaction. And the transaction, SQL Server doesn't have a corruption transaction. I mean, now, some weird bug notwithstanding, which is very rare, 99% of the time or more, it's going to be your hardware, not your hardware or your drivers at the operating system level going to the storage layer, causing the problem, not SQL Server causing the problem. So 99 or more percent of the time, the corruption will not be in your log file because, again, there's no instruction in the log file that says, relop do this, relop do that, blah, blah, corrupt data. All it's going to do is replay your inserts, deletes, and updates. And that's all the transaction log backup is a replay of those items. So what you're able to do now is you're able to institute a downtime for an hour, maybe 2 hours if it's a big database on Sunday morning. Big whoop. You're going to save all the data. It's okay. They're still going to parade you around like a hero and restore every single transaction log. And that's easy to script out. You can find millions of scripts of that on the internet. You can do it with dbatools.io, the PowerShell set of scripts. The point is you can restore the full in every log. And because you had a corruption resistant backup strategy, because you kept all those logs, you now have no problem. That's a big deal. And most people don't do that. And I work for a couple of vendors as a I don't work for them, but they contact us. So we're kind of like one of the go-to people for clients with corruption and other problems in their environment. And I hate the conversation with the vendor's client when I say, hey, what's the problem? And say, well, we have this error message. And so on 823 or 824 or cannot continue scan or whatever the error message is. And there's so many of them. It's corruption. And I say, well, when's your last backup? And, when did it start? And sometimes I don't know when it started. Well, when was your last check DB? Well, we don't do check DB. And the corruption has potentially been there forever, for weeks or months, and someday is gonna have to get lost. Or you can, call Paul Randall and he can potentially play in a hex editor and do some magic, if you luck out. We shouldn't use luck to manage our SQL servers. That's why we have to make sure that we don't treat our SQL servers like a rotisserie chicken machine and do set and forget it. So what's the other thing you can do when you're done? Document. I know. Raise your hand if you like documentation, right? I like reading documentation. I got to be honest. I've been doing IT for 20 years. Documentation is one of those things that I need to be better at still. And after 20 years, I don't know. Should I stop saying I should get better at it? I mean, I don't know. I don't like writing documentation. I like fixing the problem. I like getting in there and solving the issues and slaying the dragon, and then leave me alone. And pay my bill if you want, and then leave me alone. But we can't do that. We can't just do our upgrade and then say, leave me alone. We have to document. So I know you don't like it, but it really, really does help. You're not going to be at your company forever. Now, if you are here and you're with Straight Path, I hope you will be. I like the team we have right now. But you probably won't be at your company forever. Somebody else is going to take it over. Do you want to be the person that's talked about is, yeah, I remember when, Mitch or whatever, some name that's not in the chat room here, um, was not was not here. Was here. Remember what he did? He messed this whole environment up, didn't he? And we have no documentation, and what a loser. You don't want that. You want people to say, be more like the DBA who just left. Look at this document. Look at this book that he gave us, the run book. This is just my notebook, but look at this run book that the DBA left of all these things they've done. Um, Make a run book. What are the jobs supposed to be there? What's the desired configuration? How should it be? How did you configure it? Why did you make the max stop 8 instead of 4? Why did you make it 4 instead of 8? Why did you make it 1 instead of 4? um, why did you set CTFP? Why did you do this? Just a simple document that describes what you did. Take our PDF and talk about those things. Make your own version of that for your company. When we install SQL, this is our standards. Make standards, make documents of your environment, describe how you did the upgrade so that when you go to do this again in 4 years, it can be easier. And if you have a problem, and if you have a really big problem where you don't have HADR, like we'll talk about in a few weeks in our webinar series, but you don't have a good HADR plan and your system's down and you have to rebuild stuff, well, your run book can help you. And save the sign off email, cover your butt, save the sign off email from, again, we talked last week about during, get a sign off email, get somebody other than you to say, yep, I concur. Our environment is really, really, really strong and it's a good environment and the upgrade is successful and we're happy. Get that email and save that email. Get a folder in your inbox about the upgrade and keep it there and have something to go back to. The round to it list. The round to it is someday we'll do that when we get around to it. And I've never gotten a round to it. So I don't know what that means, but I always say I'll do that when I get around to it. Nobody's ever given me a round to it. I think it actually means I'm never going to do it. When we do upgrades, we sometimes get a layer list. Everybody has a different list. Some companies, the upgrade policy is let's just upgrade and don't change anything. We want to keep it as streamlined as possible. I was just talking to a customer yesterday. They're about to do a tech refresh, and the tech refresh's parameters are this has to look exactly the same when we're done. Development has no time to do any changes. We don't have any time to change anything here or there. We can't tweak things. We don't have time to do full regressions. But I had a long chat, but anyway, the idea is we don't have time to do a lot of changes, so change as little as possible. Don't change logins. Don't try and make things better. Just upgrade them. And I said, well, let's have a conversation about that. But sometimes that's what your business will demand, and you can say no, I'm not going to do it, and go like that, and just stare at them. But that may or may not work, and depending on your how else the job goes for you and what's good and what's bad about the job and what the job market is, you might win the argument by turning in your resume, or you might lose the argument or win the argument by just doing the upgrade. So sometimes we have a later list. A lot of times it's around security. Nobody wants to mess with logins. Nobody wants to delete that database that I don't think anybody uses, but man, somebody might be using it. So document your later list. Document the things that you didn't do that you would love to do, and make a pick list. Yes, you have to keep the lights on. You have, as a DBA, depending on the number of servers you have, you're going to spend 5 hours a week, maybe 10 hours a week, keeping the lights on, responding to user requests, doing the little login things, the periodic patching, restore tests that you have to do manually, just all the little stuff that you have to do as a DBA. That happens. And then you have the projects, and you have a lot of meetings when you're a full-time person, a lot of meetings. I have meetings too, but at least I get paid to be in a meeting. I don't. I mean, I pay myself by the year, not by the meeting. But you get less meetings as a consultant. And then you have a little bit of time to do projects. So take all your later stuff and make a project list and then prioritize it. I would say one of the most important things for me is, backup and recovery. If you're backup and recovery, a long time ago, I had a manager named George, and I have a blog post that talks about this. And I'll make a note to put that blog post out there as well. So I'm a DBA. Where do I start, or whatever it's called? And that was one of my first blog posts from 2009. But I had this manager named George, and maybe 3 or 4 years in my career. So I was a DBA, and I knew this stuff. But he sat down and said, "Hey, listen, I've been an Oracle DBA my whole career, and I want to give you some tips. As a DBA, we should care about the ITs of database administration, the ITTIES, the ITs of database administration." I look at him in the office. What the heck are you talking about? And I was like, is this are we going someplace inappropriate? Like, what do you mean? And he says, recoverability, security, availability. He said performability, um, the IDs of database administration. And I have a whole blog post that talks about this. There's two that I think have to have a certain order. After these two, it can be any order that your company needs. If you can't recover, that even shouldn't be on a round to it list. That should not be on a later list. That needs to be on the I'm going to do right now list, or my job's in jeopardy. If you cannot recover your database right now, leave this webinar right now and fix that problem. After that, I think security is the next itty to worry about, because security is really important. Because if you go and make all these best practice changes and then somebody else, well meaning or not, comes behind you and tries to fix these things for you to help you weren't asking them to help you. That's one of the things we talk about with our kids. We say, listen, it's good to help, but if you aren't sure, don't just do something that you don't think we want. Ask first. Don't do that if you're not told to do it. Like, we have to tell them, please help when we tell you to help, and don't help in areas that you don't understand yet. But your vendors will do that to you. Your other staff will do that to you if they have access. I worked at one company and we had an offshore team in Ireland, and I came in as a new DBA and I secured the environment. I locked it down tight. I said, we're going to do group-based and role-based. We made a DBA group, and I put the DBA group into the SA role. And everything was good. And then I went ahead and started fixing settings. So recoverability first, then secured. And then after that, you can work on best practice config, performance, and all the other long-term stuff that you'll do for your lifetime as a DBA. But you have to do those two things first. So anyway, I did the security thing, and then I fixed max stop, I fixed max memory. I did a bunch of settings changes because it was a small environment that was actually a busier environment. But anyway, it was mismanaged, and it was a lot of easy things to fix. Well, I happened to look back at the service. Hey, who changed max stop? And there's only like 2 people in the DBA group. And anyway, what happened is one of the developers in Ireland called the help desk and said, "Hello, would you please add me to the DBA group?" And the help desk said, "Sure, no problem. Anybody else?" So the Irish team was in the DBA group. Like, no, why do they do that? So I learned something that, you're only as good as as everybody else. It's like the hiking rule. You're only as fast as your slowest hiker. You're only as secure as your least careful member of the team. So then we had to talk to the help desk and have a policy that, no, you should make a group owner. And the DBA team is the group owner, and nobody comes into our group until you get permission from the DBA team. So we identified another hole. But anyway, fix your recoverability, fix your security. Then you can start doing encryption at rest with TD to make the auditors happy. You can start doing SSL encryption. And by the way, that's another webinar series I'd like to do if you all think it makes sense. But I'd like to do a webinar maybe, towards the end of April, May, when we're done with the HADR one, about security and encryption. And I'm not a guru in there at all. I do a lot with clients that I'm strong up, but I'll see if I can get maybe like Brian Kelly or somebody to join for a webinar if he's willing or two, because he's like a security whiz and guru. Do your restore tests. Make sure you offline your backups like we talked about last week. And like that blog post I posted last week talked about, if you don't have an offline, not connecting the internet copy of your backup, it's liable for somebody malicious to delete it. And then you can look for those unused databases and track them down and delete them. So you're going to have a later list. It's okay. Just make sure you don't make it a never list, because sometimes a later list can be a never list. Patching. Yes, we have to patch. And I've evolved. I told you best practices evolve. I've evolved my patching stance. In fact, it changes. It depends on the day it changes. Here's the deal. Everybody's opinion is different. And I'm curious what you all think. If somebody has a really strong opinion, go ahead and type it out there. SQL Server 2019, there'll be no more service packs. Before there was and is service packs. I'm a fan of applying a service pack after maybe 1 or 2 CUs. And why? I used to be afraid of patches from Microsoft SQL Server team, because there were some problems, the 2008 days and 2005 days and in 2000 days, but it got stronger, like 2012, and there was a couple of problems here and there, but 2012 and 2014 were fairly strong, and then we started having a couple of weird things. Like, I forget where it was now, but was it one of the 2016 SPs? I get, it's all a blur because I have to support so many versions, but one of the SPs that was recently in the past 5 years or so, or 3 years, caused potentially corruption on doing an online index rebuild. And I think it was 2016 SP1, but I actually forget. Doesn't matter. And actually, I want to put another link. SQL Sentry has an amazing little website where they actually list all the builds. and they have red flags about the bills that you should avoid and quickly patch after. But anyway, I wait now, maybe a CU, maybe a second CU before I patch a SQL Server to a service pack. I try and keep all my service packs current, and up until 2019, I've always had the opinion of saying, I'm not going to apply every CU that comes out. I'm going to analyze it and see if it affects you or affects me. Now that 2019 is moving to a no service pack kind of patching model, I think I'll probably be more apt to just kind of go with the latest CU, but I might be more apt to go with the second to latest CU. So, if CU 10 is a current CU, I'm going to do CU 9 once CU 10 comes out. And I'm going to look at CU 10 and see, are there any fixes for CU 9? If there aren't, I'm just going to put CU 9 out and then wait and always just be one behind. That's I think the patching that I am implementing, and I'll probably push straight path towards doing with our clients is always be just a little bit behind everybody else. Let somebody else get the nosebleed for you. If anybody has a totally different opinion, type it out in the chat. There's a bunch of you here, a few of you are chatting, but type it out if you have a different opinion. And if you don't, that's fine. We can talk about it next week too. So does your SQL Server talk to you? And yes, it should. A good DBA, and I'm kind of joking, but a good DBA should get phantom buzzes on their hips. Like if they're on vacation, they should think they're. I'm joking. Like, you should actually not get phantom buzzes because you should have stopped all the noise. We'll talk about it in the next slide. But do you have database mail set up? Do you have agent operators? That's just so basic. You don't have to buy any tool for that. You can set up a database mail, set up an agent operator, and then set up alerts. So your SQL Server can at least tell you when it's really unwell. It might not tell you when it's sort of feeling like it might be sick next Tuesday, but it will tell you when it's barfing. And then do you take regular baselines? You can do that for free with a tool like PAL. And again, I have a blog post about that. And Perfmon. Do you have monitoring tools? There's free monitoring tools out there. There's Ops Manager. There's DBA checks. Steve Stedman has a tool out there. I think Daniel Janik might have a tool. But there's a bunch of tools that are free. There's that new one that people keep talking about, which I'm actually drawing a blank on the name. But I actually need to, it's on my list. It's on my round to it list to download and play with. I figure what it's called now. It's making me mad. Anyway, once I'm done with this webinar, it'll come to me. It's, looks pretty cool actually. And I'll put in the links when I have it. And I apologize to the makers of this tool, but it's a community-based tool for SQL Server monitoring and Ops Manager. There's a lot that are free. There's some great paid ones. I'm a huge fan of SQL Sentry. I don't make a lie about that. I'm a partner there, so we use that tool all of our managed DBA customers. So we have a lot of clients where we actually are their DBA team, or we're their senior DBA team for their existing DBAs, mentoring and coaching their DBAs. Well, all those clients, we give them an included license of SQL Sentry because I just Sentry 1, I still say SQL Sentry. I find them to be the best. I think SolarWinds DPA is not a bad second tool as well. So there's some great paid ones that do a little bit more than the free ones as well. But monitoring tools are not expensive. They're not as expensive as downtime. They're not as expensive as you spending hours trying to find the worst query. Now, Query Store helps for sure. But I still like the monitoring tools to help pinpoint where I'm going to go. I'm still a big fan of just knowing exactly how to go into the monitoring tool I prefer. Get to the time, see the query, find the query, tell them why it's a bad query, get them the plan, and just solve it. And I do that with SQL Sentry. You can do that with Query Store, and I'm sure you can do that with the free tools as well. The trick is, I don't care how you do it. Make your SQL Server talk to you. That's the trick. And then you can't just have it talk to you. You have to actually listen to it, right? So, this is the slide that came to mind. If you know Seinfeld, you know that scene. He had made a reservation for a rental car, I think, or I forget. I'm pretty sure it was a rental car. But he shows up, and they didn't actually hold the reservation for him. So, you know how to take your reservation. You just don't know how to hold the reservation. So you know how to have your SQL Server talk to you. You just know how to listen to it. So having it send you an alert is cool. But I've gone to many shops actually. When we do health checkers, hey, do you know you've had like 75 emails a week for severity 20 error or, whatever. Yeah, we got a lot of noise from SQL. So we turned that down. We stopped that alert. Like, well, that's a big deal. Why did you stop the alert? Because we get so many of them. So you can get alert fatigue. Alerts are cool, but ignoring them is common. So try and be uncommon and don't ignore them. Now, part of that is you have to filter the noise. And that's hard work. I know. I run a support company that does, we do DBA as a service, right? So we're like a senior DBA team for people, and we have a lot of alerting tools and all of our customers, and we get noise. We get noise that we're trying to filter through, and it's hard. But if you put in the effort to get rid of the noise, you'll find the meaningful noise, you'll find the meaningful alerts and be able to fix a problem before your users call you, right? Your goal as a DBA should be, my SQL Server is going to run all the time. I'm going to prevent an alert from happening. Your second goal should be, when something bad happens, I'm going to know about it before my users tell me about it. And I'll tell them, hey, there's an issue, we're working on it. That's so cool. Your users would be like, what? Did IT just send me an email and tell me there's a problem? They told me that it's gonna be slow and they're working on it? Like, that's amazing. Imagine if the power company called you and told you, "Hey," well, actually, they do now with the text message, but anyway, um, you wanna find the problems before the users do, because then you have more chance to solve it, and then the impact is less widespread, right? New features, I can't talk about the new features here. Every version has so many. In fact, my team, Tara wrote one blog post. We have a lot. I'm trying to get a blog post together with an ensemble blog post with all the team, to talk about their favorite new features. There's so many new features in SQL Server. There are so many people who could have used windowing functions for the past 15 years. Um, there's security features. There's dynamic data masking. There's a new feature in SSMS for data masking, of copies or clones. There's so many features out there, but we don't use them. So learn about them and use them. Learn from the SQL community. Pass's motto, right? I think it still is connect, share, and learn. Um, I think that's what it is. Connect, share, and learn. Sounds right. But connect and learn, I know. I'm pretty sure it's share, but connect and learn, right? So you belong to a community of people who want to give so much knowledge to you. Take advantage of it. Go to the past events, go to group buy conferences, go to webinars like this, and watch the recordings later, read blog posts, and just learn and look at all these new features you're not using because you're on SQL Server 2008 or 2012 still. Stop doing that. um, HADR, after the upgrade, if you said somebody will do it, it's time. It's time to give yourself some high availability, and you can do it without having to spend $1 million, right? And that's what we're going to do I'm going to have a blog post next week about the next webinar series. I want to talk about high availability DR. I want to talk about the matrix, if you will, of RPO and RTO. Your business wants 0 and 0, and you say, sure, this is the number of dollar signs. I want to talk about that ratio and talk about how to negotiate and how to plan, and talk about how to think about an HADR. So again, like the upgrade series, you're not going to leave that building a bunch of HADR solutions, but I hope to give you some talking points, and even more than this. Than the upgrade, frankly, we kind of said, hey, let's do this. I just want to do it. I'm going to stop talking about it because of my round two it problem I described earlier. I just want to do it instead of waiting until I get around. I've been wanting to do this webinar series for like 2 years. I just keep making excuses. So I just gunned this one to do it. The HADR one I'm giving more thought to. I've been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We'll have a couple downloads for you for that as well, even ahead of time. um, but I want to talk through what you should think about when you do an HADR solution. So it's time now to do it. I mean, even if it's just using your VM HADR, even if it's making a failover cluster, if it's an availability group, even if it's a basic availability group, log shipping is still a great approach. There's SP All Night Log to help you with that. There's lots of ways that we can tackle HADR now that we're upgraded. Because if you went from SQL Server 2008 to SQL Server 2017, you have a world of options available to you that you didn't have before. So now's the time to do it. Um, so recap and homework. Remember, you're not done after you upgrade. You're never done until you quit and get out of, until you decide to get out of SQL Server and just, go be a farmer full time. And don't do that, because farming full time is interesting. We almost didn't have the webinar today. A few of my cows jumped the fence and started running around the backyard. The backyard is still their pasture, but it's wintertime, and the electric fence is just 3-strand electric. And in the wintertime, you need to get an electric fence to work. You have to be grounded and touch the electricity and feel it. But if you're walking on a bunch of dry snow, you're not grounded. So they don't care about the fence necessarily. The up close fence is all woven wire, so they can't get through it. But apparently, I just learned today that they can get over it when the snow gets high enough. They can jump over it. I wish I saw them, because that would have been a fun sight and a horrifying sight. Anyway, a few cows they're all back now. But you can retire to something more peaceful than farming. You retire to just go be like I don't know, somebody stacking umbrellas at a beach or something. But until you get to that point where you stop doing the SQL thing and hang up your SQL tools, you're not done. We have to be always evolving our knowledge, always be learning, always be thinking about the next thing. We have to be intentional. It's so easy to get stuck into responding that we forget. So be intentional. And again, next week, the other part of the homework is we have a webinar that's going to be live. It'll be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, no more than 45, I bet. Unless we have a ton of questions. I don't think we will probably, but we already have a few in email. Send me an email with your questions, or just come to the live Q&A and ask your questions. We'll all be live on camera. You can just be in the chat window, so you don't have to worry about doing all your hair and makeup like yours truly did. And just show up there and learn. And then again, we'll have about a 2-week hiatus from the webinar series, and we're going to go right into the next one, HADR. And I'm thinking that's going to be a 6 or 7 week webinar series. If I finally stop my ideaing. So that's it. Anyway, thank you. That's that. So I talked about the chat here. So again, go to this link, and I'll put this link onto my blog post. Actually, it already is my blog post, I think. If not, I'll go in there and edit today's blog post with this. Actually, I'll put it into can I put it into the chat? Yeah, I can. Just give me a second. I can't. I'll put it in the chat in a second. I'll figure out how to do it. I'll put this in the chat when I'm done with the link here. Apparently, I can't edit this while I'm delivering it, but I'll put this link here so you can get to it, or just go to Straight Path SQL. So if you actually just go to my blog, go to one of my videos, you'll see the Straight Path channel. There's not many videos there, and you'll see this live webinar. So thank you. Ask your questions, get them to me, and that's it. So now I can say thank you. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar. I really appreciate it. My goal here is to help you and teach you. My goal here is to give you knowledge. So thanks. Mike just shared the video link. So thanks, Mike. So thanks for coming. I hope this helped. Next week's the wrap-up webinar.